Hey, thanks for jumping back in. So today I want to talk about how, since I did so many years in hospice and palliative care, the main patient population with whom I worked and for whom we cared were people really who were living with chronic conditions for many years, typically. And today I'm going to get a little bit personal. I haven't gotten super personal on many things yet, just maybe a little bit here and there, but I'm going to get a little more personal because for people who are lucky enough to not have a chronic condition or, having to deal day to day with chronic condition, I want to just give them a little bit of an idea of a little bit of what it's like. And this is not to at all be like a sob story or get any kind of, attention or anything like that. It's just to help people understand, because I've had people, especially, good friends of mine, just try to say, can you just help me understand? Because I'm not really sure you're not talking to me. And I did that for a few reasons. So anyway, my name is Abigail, here to normalize these conversations about death and dying so we die better at the end of life and hopefully live a good one until we get there. Let's get into it today. Okay, so chronic conditions, chronic illness, chronic disease. Basically, a chronic condition is, something that you don't really recover from, versus an acute condition. And I will give a little bit more difference. An acute condition is something that usually comes on very quickly and usually for a brief period of time, anywhere from hours to days to maybe up to several months. And then you usually return to your baseline or your normal status of functioning. You usually fully recover from it for the most part. Chronic conditions are usually things that either can develop from an acute event, for example, be like a result of it or something, but usually take some time, usually develop over a period of time, and they don't go away. You don't really get rid of them. You can do things to really manage them and manage them even well, as a matter of fact. And usually they are causes of morbidity and mortality, basically decreasing in functionality and death at some point. So, we're all going to die at some point anyway, so that's kind of the deal that we signed up for. So, for me, I made a couple of social media posts just very briefly on some things, but, mostly like 5 years ago is when my health really took a big hit. I was getting progressively sicker over the years before then, but I just really ignored it. I was just super committed in a really distorted way to my career. My VP told me that I was doing the job of at least 3 people, and I was in a executive role, being a clinical expert. I also did other things like clinical consulting. I had my own nonprofit. I was, chairing on boards, and I was just really trying to do everything I could to basically do stuff while I'm here, because I have this strong drive to want to make a difference while I'm here. Because for me, I feel like if I have any opportunity to and capability, I want to make sure that I leave this planet better than when I first got here. And that for me is just important. It's always been big for me to give back, especially to underserved populations, but also just give back in general, and animals, the earth, people, all that kind of stuff. I feel like it's really important. So that's kind of a little bit where I'm coming from. And I just dedicated myself to work just 100% and really ignored the signals my body was trying to give me. And with that said, I really started having already some physical issues, took a couple trips to the hospital for certain symptoms and things like that. And so in 2020, which was about 5 years ago, is when I really started to go downhill, is when I started to get diagnosed with some things. 2020 and 2021 were really couple of the worst years for me. 2021 in particular was really bad. That was the year I had to go on medical leave. I was advised to go on medical leave early in 2020, but because of the pandemic, I felt like I needed to stay at work, and I felt like I needed to help my team out, and I ended up just killing myself even more. And then eventually, the end of 2020, I was so bad that I agreed to finally go on medical leave, and I even gave my work a month's notice. And just so you know, when a physician says you need to go on medical leave and go on disability, you do it when they tell you to. You don't say, oh, well, I'm going to give my work a month's notice. So if I could go back, I just would do so many things differently. But Over these last several years, I've had 2 or 3 years which were really tough. The last couple of years, temporarily I'm living in Europe, for it's a work thing. And this has been a good change because it really made me get out of that work, that line of work that I was doing, especially that particular company that really I think just took advantage of my naivete, because I was really naive when it came to, everyone's just going to watch out for each other. They're going to watch out for me like I watch out for them. And I've suffered severe burnout, and I have all these other conditions. I'm taking a bunch of medications now, but they're not going to use and abuse me like they did before, and they use and abuse me like they always did. So, that's a whole other thing, especially when work tells you that you're family. That's the lines get blurred, and it's just not good. And I was the perfect person to put in that recipe because they could really just exploit that, and they did. And I just trusted them, and that was my mistake, to just trust people blindly and thinking that they would have my best interests at heart when they obviously didn't. All that to say is now I'm on, I've got several chronic conditions. I'm on about 12 to 13 medications, depending on labs, depending on symptoms, depending on what else is going on, and just dealing with another recent thing. And the one thing I want to help people understand, especially when I was like really at my sickest, I'm better now, but I'm dealing with other stuff now, and I'm constantly dealing with the issues that are my condition. So with this all said, and for those people, I've had people kind of online ask me, like, what's your deal? Like, why are you on so many medications? Well, I was very obese, even though, people can tell me whatever it is. They can tell me that I was calorie counting wrong, whatever. I was intermittent fasting 6 days a week. I was doing these crazy workouts on top of the intense amount of hours of work that I was doing all the time on my 2 phones, always on call. I mean, I don't need to go into, I don't need to justify, I don't need to try to prove myself. I really just did a number of myself, and landing in the hospital several times with issues, and being told that I was on the road to very high risk of morbidity, mortality, and going to be dying at a young age, not going to be, these conditions are just going to get worse, all that kind of stuff. And, living with a lot of fear around it, because I also, as a registered nurse and, learning more stuff about it, I knew enough and I understood things well enough to be scared for the right reasons. And if anyone is curious and they want to ask me more, I can go into detail, sure. But the point of this is to really tell you what it's like to live with chronic conditions, so that if you have a loved one in your place, or loved one in your life, you can kind of understand. This is what it feels like, especially when I was really, really sick. And even now, it's just, you never know what the day's going to bring. And especially when I was at my worst, the not being able to make plans is like, you're shooting a dart in the dark, having no idea where it's going to hit, because you don't know how you're going to feel in the next hour, half hour, whatever. You could wake up feeling kind of okay and thinking I can get through the day. And then, in an hour or two, you feel like I need to go back to bed. I can't deal with this any longer. Or, my blood sugar's a little off today, even though I ate absolutely perfectly. I did my workout. What the heck is going on? My blood pressure is doing something funky. I took my medication. Now I'm getting too lightheaded, or now why is it high? Even though I took my medication, I'm not even drinking caffeine. I went years without any caffeine, no alcohol. Now, since I'm in Europe, I do a little bit, I do just some regular coffee here and there. And in the wintertime, during the Christmas markets, I have, a cup of Glühwein at most. But I'm not, I really don't like the way alcohol feels, and I don't want to get too hyped up on caffeine. So I'm never going back to kind of where I was before, especially with caffeine. I used to drink caffeine like crazy. I never was a really big drinker. My poison was always sugar and carbohydrates. But I went through so many years where I was doing all the keto, and like the really healthy keto, the really green keto. The worst thing I ate, and it's not even bad, was fruit. And it was usually berries or, dark chocolate. And it would be like the 100% dark chocolate. This is when I was like, trying to get well, and trying to also, and I had periods also leading up to before I got sick, where I was like really into eating clean and lots of fruits and veggies. I did vegan for a while, plant-based. I even, all that kind of crap. But anyway, you wake up and you can't trust your own body. You can't trust what it's going to do. And you feel like you're putting all this effort. For me, especially, I always put in a ton of effort at my job, volunteering, whatever it was. I always put in so much effort in everything that I did because I wanted to do the right thing. And I was so scared, especially at the point where I was really sick in 2020, 2021, and 22, that I was really motivated by fear. So I was on the script, and I stuck to the script line by line to make sure that I'm like, okay, I don't know. Yes, of course, it's not to be afraid of dying, but I wasn't so much afraid of the dying because at least that would relieve me of this physical body that I'm burdened with. I feel quote unquote burdened with. It was more of the loss of functionality that really, really bothered me. And, still to this day is what keeps me at least motivated to care for myself. And really make my health a priority at this point. But then recently I'm dealing with some other things that came up, mainly because I got back into flamenco dancing. This was something I never thought I'd get back into, primarily because I was obese for several years. Most of my 30s, I was vacillating between just overweight and obese. And I finally, was able to make changes. This took me years and years to even get down to this weight, but I still have a little bit to go, but I've been, a little bit stuck at that for a while. But I mean, I'm happy where at least I've made it this far. But anyway, all that said, dealing with this other thing now. And here's the thing too, also, I was entered perimenopause in my early 30s when I was 31, 32 years old. I didn't realize it at the time, going back in my history and all these other symptoms. I had 3 bouts of where I would go, think when I was 34, 35, 38, 39, and then 42, 43, I was dealing with severe issues with hormonal fluctuations. I'm talking about female hormone fluctuations and just complete, dysregulation of my periods, and then exhaustion, and then anemia, and then also hot flashes, even in my early 30s. So at the age of 43 or 42, 43, I entered menopause. And menopause is defined as the 1 year after the last period that you experience, once you've reached the perimenopausal area of your life. So I entered menopause at a very, very young age. And of course, thankfully, I'm on HRT. For those having questions about HRT and having fear, that whole women's health study has been really debunked. The fears around estrogen replacement and hormone replacement in general, you really need to look at that, what kind of medications they used, and do your research, because there's actually real efficacy and real importance of replacing your hormones. Of course, talk with your doctor, but there's so much more to that. But anyway, I'm luckily on hormone replacement therapy for that. Also, a couple for my thyroid not working. I was on temporarily for adrenals. Anyway, the whole point of this is to say that I didn't have to be at this point. I didn't have to be at this point where I felt like I contributed a lot to my community, but my repayment was to spend all the money that I made, literally spend all the money that I made from medical costs, medical, trips to the ER, medical appointments, medications, treatments, and then other alternative treatments, which are also very expensive, particularly in the States. Everything is so expensive. And just burning through that. So it's the not having your trust in your physical body to do what you need it to do, just to behave for a day, because you want to make sure you show up for a friend. And you don't know what it's going to do, or if it's going to put you in a place where you feel a lot of pain, where you feel a lot of fatigue, where you can't think straight, you can't find your words, whatever it is, or your blood sugar is doing something funky, or other things are doing something really funky, and you can't really function. You're afraid to be outside on your own. To having to just make sure to keep track of all your medications, because my medications at this point, still, I have to take 6 to 7 times, different times in the day, I have to take medications, and I have to take it at those different times because they're dosed accordingly, and whatever, all that bullshit. So what I'm trying to communicate with while telling my story, I know it's a little bit kind of just all over the place, is just the feeling of being overwhelmed, and not just overwhelmed, the feeling of fear, the feeling where you can't have any semblance of, I can kind of trust something for myself, or I can kind of put some trust in myself or my body that I can at least get through the day. It's gotten better, sure. But, and I'm lucky, I'm fortunate enough to be in a situation where I have time to take care of myself. This is a very odd situation, very different situation than I ever imagined I would ever be in my life. And so I'm out here, I'm in a very good position for myself right now in terms of my health and being able to take care of my needs at this point. So all of this just to share and say that the living day to day with chronic conditions does feel like a lot. And even when, someone with a chronic condition says, I'm tired, I feel really fatigued, it's like a fatigue that just doesn't go away just by taking a nap or having a really good night's sleep. There's no such thing as that. It's a fatigue that you really can't just shake off. It never really goes away. With my stuff particularly, fatigue is a big issue in addition to just the management of things. And, even if I get a cut on something, I have to be really careful. I have several problems even just with little things. So, my degeneration, with several other aspects of just physically, it's a never ending, show. I wanted to say something else. It's a never ending show of just one thing after another. And again, like I said, I'm much better off than when I was a few years ago. But it's so much work. It's more work than I could ever imagine. And I know that I'm nowhere near how some other people and what they're dealing with are. People who have really serious things that are, where they're on 20, 30 medications a day. I'm only on 12, 13. And, I've gotten used to it. I know what all my pills look like. I got all my emergency stash. I've got all my, all the things that I carry with me. But, now I have to carry stuff with me everywhere I go. My blood sugar stuff, all that, blood pressure monitor, whatever it is, I have to carry all that with me in addition to my medications and backup stuff. Can never just leave the house with nothing, my water bottle and a purse or something. I always have to leave with everything because I never know. And there are times where I have to use things all the time, pretty frequently. And I know that there are people who are much, much worse off than I am. So I'm not trying to be here to try to get sympathy or anything like that. What I'm trying to do is just say the life of someone who is living with any level, any degree of chronic condition and disease is a life that is, it's hard to feel settled in sometimes. It's hard to find a level of trust within yourself because you don't know what's going to happen. And also for me at least, there's always a little bit of anxiety of, I need to make sure, especially living in Europe, there's certain medications I can't get here. So I have to go to the States sometimes, or my loved one has to come when they come from the States to visit me. They bring my medications, but I always have to make sure that there's a little bit of anxiety associated with me always around making sure I've got enough medications. And it's because if I can't miss my medications, my 12, 13 medications, I can't miss on a day because I have, there are serious things, ramifications if I miss them, if you don't take these medications. So, if you have somebody in your life that is dealing with chronic conditions, I imagine that it can be exhausting if you're dealing with if it feels like they're always having to deal with the crap, but they're the one living in it. And so if you're exhausted, they're probably 2-3 times more exhausted just by dealing with it on a day-to-day basis. And I'm not saying this is an excuse at all to excuse poor behavior, poor treatment of somebody, anything like that. Sometimes I think people assume that people with chronic illness are lazy. Just like with anything, it's always important to seek to understand versus, more than anything. And the person with a chronic condition has to take responsibility for their condition, of course. I take my full responsibility. I always feel weird even talking about this because I don't, I've always been a person that's like, I don't want to complain. I don't want to sound like I'm complaining. I don't want to sound like I'm feeling sorry for myself, but I think it's important for people who luckily are healthy enough to not have a chronic condition to kind of know what it may be like for someone who does, especially if they have someone in their life that is dealing with it to whatever degree. Hopefully it's minimal. Hopefully it's not too serious. If you have any questions or if you want more specifics, I'm glad to get into it. And this is just kind of to touch the bases. I like to keep my episodes short, as you know, because this type of stuff heavy enough as it is. I love you. We'll keep normalizing these conversations about death and dying so we die better at the end of life, and hopefully, again, live a good life until we get there. I really appreciate you popping in, and I will talk to you soon. Talk to you later. Bye.